So this very interesting Supreme Court judgment came recently. A very fascinating ethical, moral, legal dilemma which got resolved, of course, because the Supreme Court is the final arbiter of law, but left me very conflicted with regards to whether it's fair on us to subject our soldiers to a different set of standards than we would subject ourselves. The case involves a soldier, Dalbir Singh, who more than 12 years ago, in an anti-incumbency operation in Jammu and Kashmir, he basically, it is alleged that he chose to save his life rather than put his life on the line and save the integrity of the country and the life of his colleagues. He just chose to save his life. He ran behind a wall, and he was court-martialed. Then the case went to the Armed Forces Tribunal, and finally, it obviously has gone to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has given its opinion in the matter. What I will do is I'll first present the facts of the case on both sides, and then I'll tell you what the Supreme Court said before it came to its judgment. Right? So let's try to understand what happened on that fateful day and night. So these are the facts of the case. This happened on August 13, 2006. So Dalbir Singh, he had joined the army in 1991, and he's basically a sepoy. He was part of a cordon and search operations with the Rashtriya Rifles in the Dari Gidyan village in Jammu and Kashmir. On that day, you see, there were various reports that a team of terrorists is hiding in that area, somewhere in around the maize field there, and these people were trying to ascertain the veracity of the whether how truthful was the intelligence input, and then suddenly they came under fire. And when they came under fire during the daytime, the security cordon was expanded, and the night vigil was put around the maize field where supposedly the fire came. Now, Dalbir Singh was in charge of a light machine gun, and along with him was Sapper Gurmail Singh. Sappers are those who help the army install infrastructure in various operations. So Dalbir Singh and Gurnail Singh were manning the light machine gun in that anti-insurgency operation, and suddenly they came under fire at around 11 p.m. at night. They came under intense fire, and apparently it was very heavy, the fire, and these two were supposed to respond to that. To respond to that, they had their own AK-47 rifles and the light machine gun. But as it turned out, Dalbir left his post. This is something which he also agrees to. Why he left is disputed by him. But he left his post. There was a stone wall right behind them. So he jumped across the stone wall, and he did not retaliate against the militants. It's a fact that he did not fire a single bullet from his AK-47 or his pistol. Now, unfortunately, what as a result of this, although Dalbir says that it was inevitable that this would have happened, Gurmail Singh was killed by the terrorists, and they also took away the LMG of the army. Right, so this is what happened on that night on August 13, 2006. In that process, Dalbir was no doubt hit by a bullet in the leg. And let us all the facts that I am using here are directly from the Supreme Court judgment. I mean, the case as recorded by the Supreme Court there. So what the court says is that this is what the court has said, that no doubt he was hit by a bullet in the leg while he was trying to cross the stone wall to run to safety. Apparently, he was still hit by a bullet in his leg, and that's the fact. So now, what is the version of Dalbir Singh in this? Now, before we come to his version, we have to understand that the army gave him a complete trial. The Summary General Court Martial (SGCM), which is one of the three ways in which a court martial proceeding is held in the army, it in 2008 announced that Dalbir Singh will be dismissed from the service and will have to undergo 6-month rigorous imprisonment, as per Section 34C of the Army Act. The army no cases are handled separately unless there are cases with regards to rape, murder, or civilian casualty. It's the army resolves its own matters internally through the Army Act as administered by the mechanism of court martial. Now, Dalbir Singh appealed against this in the Armed Forces Tribunal, which in 2011 said that the SGCM had arrived at the right verdict and therefore he stays terminated and he will have to undergo a 6 month rigorous imprisonment. And after that, he filed a further appeal through his counsel, and the court went to the Supreme Court. And it's in 2019 that the final verdict has been delivered. Now, what are Dalbir's points here? First, he says he himself was injured. The whole this whole thing, this whole case is about whether Dalbir Singh acted in a cowardly manner. That's all this is about. So what he says is that he himself was injured, and no doubt as the Supreme Court said, no doubt he suffered from a bullet injury, and therefore he cannot be called a coward. And then he says this is the most interesting point that he makes. He says that he was a good soldier, and on various other occasions, all the other occasions before this one, he had accompanied the team in several operations, and in not a single one of them was his conduct below what is expected from a soldier. This is something which his team also has agreed to, that he never showed any cowardice in any other operation. So this in this operation, it seems like something went wrong. Of course, he hasn't admitted to him feeling any jitters or nerves. It was very obvious that he was facing death. He was actually staring at death. The way, I mean, it did not take them to a lot of time to eliminate Gurmail Singh. So probably he showed jitters at that point in time. But what he says is that he did not. So what he says is that he jumped over the wall because there was no other way out. He jumped over the wall to protect himself, and then he would have responded back to the militants there. Then the point of course is that why did he not respond? Because while he was jumping, this is his version, since he was hit in the leg, I mean he was shot at the leg, he lost his consciousness for a few seconds, and he got disoriented, and therefore he couldn't respond back. And it says when he regained his consciousness, he realized his AK-47 was jammed when he tried to use it, and therefore he did not fire. He could not fire a single bullet, but his what he wanted to do was save his life and then respond to the militants at that point in time. This was his version. What is the version of the Armed Forces Tribunal, which was the respondent in this case? So this case was filed by Dalbir Singh versus the Union of India as represented by the army people there. So now they make counterpoints. They said that there is no explanation why in such a grave situation he did not fire a single bullet either from his pistol or from the AK-47 that he was carrying to retaliate against the enemy. It's absolutely impossible that he did not have any chance to do that before or and after he jumped the wall. Why did he not do it? And the second point is, of course, as you would have realized by now, the most serious aspect of this is that now the Armed Forces Tribunal think that Gurmail Singh would not have died or could have been saved had Dalbir Singh not abandoned his post, and that probably led to the death of Gurmail Singh. And this is a serious charge. You basically did not just abandon his post; he also abandoned his mate there, and so completely disregarding that the fact that he may live, but his colleague will probably die. And then they say that this is sort of very, I mean, Sherlock Holmes kind of kind of elementary observation. But the tribunal said that though he says he got disoriented or he was unconscious for a few seconds, he remembers the events exactly as they happened. There's absolutely nothing missing in his description of the event, as confirmed by all the other team members at that point in time. This is exactly what happened on that night. So how did this happen that he was unconscious and yet he remembers things very clearly? And the response, of course, by Dalbir is that he was only unconscious for a few seconds, about 10 to 12 seconds. So then, if it's just 10 to 12 seconds, why did he not fire? About the AK-47 getting jammed, his colleagues have testified that it did not seem likely. And the army have conducted their own investigation. They don't think there was any jamming of the AK-47 that he was using there. Right? So these are the counterpoints there. So now, what uh, so the ultimate point here is, and it's very philosophical but very true, because we are talking about the soldier. So Dalbir Singh did not rise to the occasion. This is what the Armed Forces Tribunal have alleged. So he was a coward. Instead of facing death and doing his duty for the nation, he chose to climb and jump across the stone wall, and he chose to live while he should have died for the country. He did not rise to the occasion. That's the final allegation made against him. And this whole case is not so much about him being dismissed, by the way, or the 6 month imprisonment. The Dalbir Singh's case is that he is not a coward. It's almost like his pride is at stake here. I mean, there cannot be a greater allegation against a soldier than being called a coward. And so let's see what the Supreme Court has decided. So the Supreme Court says that, and now comes the point that I was making earlier, that it makes me conflicted, probably ashamed, a bit, if not more than a bit, about what we do in our normal lives, we as civilians, and what we expect from our soldiers. So the Supreme Court said that, and this is directly from the verdict, that a soldier cannot merely live on past glory, but should rise to the occasion on every occasion to defend the integrity of the country. That's what the Supreme Court is saying. That this is a profession so profound, so meaningful to the country, that you can't just say that because I was good earlier, I may be not so good right now, and yet you should be fine with how I conduct myself. A soldier should rise to the occasion on every occasion is the first point that the Supreme Court makes, and it makes it very clear that this profession cannot be compared with any other profession, because in all the other professions, I mean, let's say if you are working somewhere, you can always point out to your boss that yes, I did not do my last assignment properly, but you see, in the last 12 months, for 10 months, I was splendid. I have only not worked properly on this assignment, and you may get a 5 out of 5. But the court says, the apex court says, this logic cannot be applied to the case of a soldier, because the soldier is manning the border. If there is one lapse, the enemy enters the country. And in this case, so they do not agree with Dalbir Singh's argument that before this, and which they said is true, but they made him understand that you can't use that logic, that in all the operations except the last one, I was exceptional. I did what was expected from me. And they also remind the soldier, and this is where we should probably be more ashamed now, that the resources of the country are spent on training a soldier to retaliate and fight when the integrity of the nation is threatened, right? So I am from IIT Kharagpur, and we IITians are mostly, many times, and I would say quite rightly on most occasions, are accused that the nation has spent a lot of resources on you, and you probably, I mean, I'm not doing any high-end research in engineering or technology right now. So so this is the kind of logic that has been applied to the soldier. But in the case of soldier, how do you repay the amount that the country spends on your training? It's to be ready to fight and die when the time comes to defend the nation, right? So that's the price that they are expected to pay for what the country has done to them, is what the Supreme Court has said. And if the soldier turns back to this challenge, what is the challenge? By the challenge is, it's fight or flight. It's a fight or flight situation. There is the enemy there, and now you are supposed to so imagine that there's a massive fire that at that point in time, when he chose to run away. It was highly likely that he would not have survived. In such a condition, if you turn your back like he did, he jumped the stone wall, he went to the other side, he chose to live. And Supreme Court says, that's an act of cowardice. You cannot do that because you are a soldier. So anybody else can do that. I mean, For example, I mean, I can choose to have nothing to do with engineering, and yet it's fine. Though most likely my education was subsidized, most of our education is subsidized, but the soldier has to put his life on the line. And therefore, finally, the Supreme Court has said, ordered, judged that the order of dismissal from service is upheld. The court just took this consideration that it has been, more than 11 years since the verdict was pronounced by the court martial, and therefore the 6-month rigorous imprisonment is not necessary. But Talbir Singh will remain dismissed from his service. And the dismissal does not matter as much to Dalbir Singh, as what matters is that he was judged as a coward, and the Supreme Court has also said that Dalbir Singh is a coward. All these words just point to that. That when the time came to sacrifice the life, you chose to run away and live. The all the trust of the country, the amount spent on you, the fact that you are in such a glorious profession where people look up to you. This is something else completely. You let everything down. Therefore, you are a coward. You remain dismissed. Will anyway, out of consideration, will not send you to prison for 6 months. Right. So this is what happened. So I read the entire judgment, just a 20-page judgment, which you can read from the Supreme Court site, and then it made me wonder, why do we not subject ourselves, which means all the non-soldiers, to the same yardsticks. So questions such as these came to my mind. I can't answer these questions, of course. I mean, you can probably, you can put in the comment if you feel like it. But do you rise to each occasion in whatever you do? We talk a lot about it in India. This is the, I mean, nationalistic phase of the country's development. Everything gets related to nationalism, and it's very easy to. It's far easier to share a tweet or an Instagram post with regards to nationalism. But the whole point is the soldier. Of course, you are not a soldier. You have not volunteered to put your life on the line. But whatever you are doing, that in some way impacts the country. Do you rise to the occasion each time you take up something in your profession, right? But doesn't the country? And the answer is no. I can speak on your behalf. And the Supreme Court also said that all the other services, they have the luxury of not being perfect all the time, but you don't have as a soldier. So why doesn't the country need us to do that all the time, right? So why is it that no, we expect soldiers to be at their best all the time, but we have other standards for the civilian part of the country? And then now, is it fair to expect the soldier to not have any moment of fear? Is what I thought. Let us say he thought about his family. Probably he had a child. He just thought about briefly. He got scared, and maybe he regretted that later. But is it fair to expect that the soldier, a soldier is somebody who doesn't feel any emotion because of their training? So why not allow the soldier to have a momentary lapse? In this case, of course, the complication is that one life had been lost. But let us also understand that even if there was no life lost as a result of this, if it had been proved that he had turned his back and he had taken flight to safety, he would have still been dismissed as per the Army Act of 1950. Cowardice is something which gets punished by removal from service. And so why is it that we think our soldiers cannot have emotions there? Now, I mean, I was going through a lot. I mean, there are not a lot of news. This has not generated a lot of debate, but wherever this judgment was mentioned, you see, I found that most of the comments were pointing to the direction of the judges themselves. So what they were saying is that yeah, it's somebody wrote it's very convenient for you to sit in your AC rooms and judge on what the soldiers should be doing and how the soldiers should be. How do you behave? And this one I have taken directly from the comment that yes, there is no room for cowardice in the army. This is what the Supreme Court has written in the verdict. There is no room for cowardice in the army. So but is there any room for cowardice anywhere in the country, in any profession, right? Because when you say there's no room for cowardice in the army, you also are saying that there is room for cowardice in other professions. Why should that be the case? So there should no there is no room for cowardice. There's no room for corruption. There's no room for hypocrites to be in the army. Which sort of admits that they can be in the other professions, right? So why is it that we want cowards in other professions? Cowards, I mean, for example, politicians who don't have the courage to take the decision which is best for the country and not for the party, that they can also be deemed as cowards. So these are, of course, this is a rant. This is almost like a political speech, and all I'm saying is these are very open-ended questions. The fundamental question that I had in my mind was that these are humans, soldiers. They can have one or two moments of lapses, but they do all the sacrifices. They undergo all the civil training. They get posted anywhere the country wants them to be posted. One or two lapses, and you see in the Indian the Army Act is very severe. One lapse and your career gets over. Not just that your career gets over. You will not even be eligible for the pensions. Your family will not get any benefits as a result of your one act of cowardice, right? And then there comes a point about, and this is again a very complicated, will not bring into one rank, one pension, and all the other. This is just one example that I have put here. That if an IAS officer is posted in the northeast, the officer gets rupees 60,000 more because it's a special duty allowance. But an army officer who is posted even in Siachen, in the Siachen Glacier, supposedly the world's toughest place to be posted at as a soldier, the soldier does not get all these extra benefits, right? So who is taking greater risks? On what basis is this being decided? That's a question which has to be answered. And remind you, we're talking about officers, army officers being compared uh, the bureaucrats. The level at which Dalbir Singh was, you see the pay scale, I think the last time I checked, is around 5,500 rupees per month. That's a pay scale. So overall in hand is, it's more or less about 22,000 per month. And you expect the man to put his life on the line, and they do. Most of them actually do that. But the counterpoint is, why can't we forgive one lapse? And basically, it's just something which should help us either get inspired to do our best like a soldier, right? We always say fight like a soldier. Do we do that in our normal spheres? This is a great ethical question. Why? You see, Aristotle, he had said that courage is the highest of all virtues. You can have all the virtues in the world, you can be the most ethical person in the world, but if you don't have courage, you nothing of it will be put into action. All your attributes will come to nothing, right? So, and it's not just for the soldier. We should have courage to pursue whatever we want to do, whatever we think is right, right? During the First World War, by the way, guess who were the people, which country used to be very prompt in executing the so-called traitors, the soldiers who turned their back, who would run away from the front because they would be obviously scared. The First World War was insane. I mean, the soldiers who went there were horrified by the trench warfare and the machine guns. They had to run right into a hail of bullets coming from machine guns. This was the first industrialized warfare, and many soldiers actually got scared and ran away. The British were at the forefront of executing by firing squad the soldiers who used to turn their back, including many Indians too at that point in time. The most liberal were the Americans, and mind you, even the Germans were not executing their soldiers at a level at which the British were executing. This we have inherited that kind of system. Of course, we are not executing anyone by firing squad, but probably there's a case to rethink how we treat soldiers who are just being human at certain moments. Is what I mean, the question I put to you is not something which I am proposing, but I'm just, these are the questions that came to my mind anyway. Of course, this is true, right? And we put all these quotes everywhere. The coward dies 1,000 times before his death. The soldier dies but once. So much we expect from the soldiers. Why not let them be humans too? I mean, why not see them as somebody who feel pain and pleasure the way we do, right? So please help me resolve the dilemma. Probably you can put in your comments, and maybe I'll respond to that. Of course, as a civilian, not as a soldier. All I can say is I mean, I'm also one of those who sit in their AC rooms and pronounce judgments on the world. Thank you.